What's up, everyone? Welcome to the summary for content update 0.3 for Path of Exile 2, the Third Edict. I don't know about you, but I am incredibly excited to get working with this. It's gonna release in about 5 days, and I literally cannot wait. There are so many big changes, so many fun little toys to play with that yeah, I cannot wait for next week Friday. Now the patch notes are immense. I kid you not, I think this is probably going to be the biggest patch for Path of Exile 2 that we've ever had. And we're going to get a lot of good changes, and I think we go definitely in the right direction. So I'm just going to show you, look, this is a massive patch. We got thousands upon thousands of words. I've highlighted a lot of things that I think are relevant, and I made some predictions. I'm going to tell you what I think is going to be buffed and nerfed, what things are good to play with and not. And so in that way, just a little fun summary, right? All we can do is just talk about it until the game comes out, right? But I hope you're just excited as I am, because honestly, this is going to be so much fun. So as you can see, in 5 days, 7 hours, 32 minutes, and 10 seconds from now, right? We're going to have the patch released. So let's go through the changes. The first one, a big one. Act 4 finally, like, oh my god. I'm so sick and tired of replaying Act 1 and 3 in Cruel. Like, the game is a lot of fun, but honestly, like, rerunning the campaign for Act 1 and 3 is so annoying. And look at this, right? So we got Act 4 right now. No Act 5 or 6, unfortunately. But I get it, they want to finish it. But we don't have to rerun Act 1 and 3. And look at the artwork. So we're gonna go and explore the islands of Namakanui, right? It's got really like an island, sort of like Karui, Hawaii type style vibe. I really love the artwork and the design here. And then obviously we're gonna get a lot of cool new bosses, right? So look at this one, the shark boss, or this sort of like ogre thing. I cannot wait to play with this, right? It's gonna be really cool. And then something to bridge, let's say between Act 4 and the end game, because we do not have Act 5 and 6 yet. We're gonna get 3 new mini-acts. They're gonna call these the interludes. So they're gonna go on a bunch of new bosses and areas. And apparently you can play these sort of in any sequence that you want. So you can start with this one first, or maybe you want to do this one or that one, right? And the fun thing about this is all of them, they give you different buffs and rewards. So maybe, who knows, maybe there will be some sort of meta developing in terms of what's most fun or best to run first. And then, oh my god, this looks amazing, right? So the new league mechanic, the first official actual league for Path of Exile 2, even though we're in pre-development, is Rise of the Abyssal League. Now, if you know Abyss, it's like a mechanic from Path of Exile 1, basically a big old fissure, sort of, opens up in the ground and monsters crawl out. And what we're going to do is we're going to kill them, and there's going to be a bunch of bosses and a lot of other cool mechanics related to that. So I think this is definitely going to be something to get heavily involved with. I think we're going to get a lot of new cool items and currency rewards for this. So let's have a look at what we got. So basically you run these sort of abysses, right? And then there's certain mechanics related to this. So you can get certain items that you can use in the Well of Souls. Now this looks really cool. Basically this is some sort of like, it's like a Veiled Orb from Path of Exile 1. So basically you put it on an item and you get sort of the hieroglyphs that you can see here. And then you get 3 different options. And I'm gonna assume that some of these options you can pick here with these desecrated modifiers, they're gonna be like unique to this kind of like crafting mechanic, right? So they're not something you can normally get with other currencies. So I think this is gonna be a massive impact on the crafting meta, and definitely gonna open up a lot of opportunities for cool and new items. So what other type of items that we're gonna get here? So this is something that you can use on waystones. So instead of just items, you can also put these mechanics on waystones. So for example, you get more abysses in your map or more rare rewards, who knows, right? And then these ones, the preserved ribs, these are for items. And then this is an example of a map that has been enhanced with one of these currency modifiers, right? So this one leads to an abyssal boss. I cannot wait to fight these guys. I think it's going to be really cool. And then here you got an item with an example of a desecrated modifier that you can get from this mechanic, right? Attacks gain 50% of damage as extra lightning damage while unarmed, right? And definitely that's a new thing. So yeah, super excited to get going with this. Yeah, this looks really, really good. And then also you got new bosses, right? So I think this is a new boss that they teased about, Kulamak, right? They didn't show much in the trailer. And by the way, the trailer looks amazing. Like 1 hour of amazing updates. And it didn't, you know, it's not like, oh my god, right, they're droning on and on. It was just 1 hour of win after win after win. I just can't believe it. So one of the cool rewards that I saw here is this one, right? Darkness Enthroned Fine Belt. This looks really cool. Apparently there's like different versions of these. So this one applies, you can get bonuses from socketed items as if it was a body armor. So you could put body armor sockables in there. But apparently you also have versions for like, you know, gloves or your helmet or your weapon, right? So a lot of cool ways to customize your character. And then what do we have here? Yeah, this is a new sort of sockable item, I think, that you can get from this boss. And this also has very, very cool new modifiers. So for example, this one, prevent 3% of damage from deflected hits. I think that's going to be a very big one, right? Because deflect is a mechanic that we're going to talk later about. And I think it's absolutely busted, right? So I don't know what they said in the trailer. They said evasion wasn't really, you know, it was one of the weakest defenses. I don't think it was. But then they also get deflect with that. So I think that's going to be really strong. And the cool thing about this, you can only get one of these abyssal eyes. At least that's the way it shows on the screen. I think that, yeah, that's going to be very, very interesting. And this is another consumable. It's a new omen, right? And this one allows you to re-roll your desecrated modifiers twice. I think that's cool because, you know, you're probably going to have to invest a lot of time and effort into getting sort of, you know, the way to get these desecrated modifiers, and then to have another chance to, you know, do another reroll and get 3 more options. That's going to be very valuable. But who knows? These things might be very expensive. What else have we got? New feature Sprint. I think this is going to be great. We'll have to see what the implementation is. You know, you're going to get heavy stunned when you do this and you get hit. So I think it's going to be great for traveling, you know, long areas. But I'm not sure how much you're going to use it in combat. And I'm just very excited to see how this is going to pan out. Because, you know, we're definitely missing a little bit of movement speed in this game. I think that's a general consensus of a lot of people. So we'll see how this goes. But it is very cool. We'll see. Right, and then the new support gem system. The system is basically being completely overhauled. And I think this is absolutely going to be the biggest change that we're going to have in this patch. So basically, support gems have been completely reworked. You can now use as many copies of the same support gem on your character as you like. And each support gem now has multiple tiers. So this allows you to upgrade them as you progress through the game. So basically, the limit for using these support gems has been moved. We're going to get multiple tiers, and we're also going to get a bunch of lineage support gems. These are like, you know, find only support gems. They're sort of like unique items. And I've seen some of these. Some of these are absolutely busted. Like, they're going to be incredibly, incredibly strong. And I'm kind of afraid of that. I think the amount of power creep that we're going to get with this is absolutely mental. And I'm not sure if GGG is going to keep them as is, but some of them, I'll reveal that later when we're going to talk through them, are absolutely crazy, right? So, all right, let's go ahead and hear what we got. So we got, you know, a lot of different balance changes and new skills, right? So I can't go through all of them because it's literally thousands upon thousands of changes. A lot of skills have been reworked and changed, but I'm going to highlight the ones that are most relevant. And then we got crafting updates. I think this is also a massive change, especially for sort of your average gamer, right? The mid-tier gamer. But the implementation of some of these currencies that we're going to get really is going to affect how it's going to go. So first of all, we're going to get of, you know, regular crafting currency like regal orbs, augmentation orbs, chaos orbs, or exalted orbs. We're going to get different tiers. And basically what these tiers will do is that they're going to put minimum modifiers on your items based on the level, right? So for example, the perfect exalted orb, it says minimum modifier level 50, which means it's only going to put modifiers on your items that have a required item level or item level of at least 50. So you're gonna get more of the good ones and you're gonna get less of the bad ones. So crafting currencies like this one are gonna open up a lot of sort of mid-tier, crafting currency, crafting options for most players. And hopefully this will just allow the average gamer to get easier access to decent items. Not perfect mirror tier super endgame items, but you don't need these to clear the game. So I think for most people this is going to be a big W. There's another page here. So the essences have been updated. So now they are they're not, for example, in this example, they're not going to put like a fire modifier on an item, but it's going to be more like a deterministic regal orb, basically. So in this case, it's going to put flat fire damage on an item, right? And then you got different tiers of these. And for example, the perfect one has pretty good stats. And they're a little bit different than these ones. So this is flat, and this is damage as extra fire damage. So I think, once again, this is going to be great. Another update is new omens. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to highlight one here. And this is the Omen of Sanctification. And this is going to be very, very interesting. I watched a video from Belton. I'll put his link in the video. It's a long video, but he's a mirror tier crafter. He's way more experienced than I am. And he basically explained that the way this item will work, and we're not sure how it's going to work because it's not exactly specified in the patch notes yet, but the way this item will work is very much going to determine the economy in the game. So basically what this item does is, if you use a divine upon a rare item, it will sanctify it. So it will basically re-roll all the modifiers in that same tier and then increase them by 80% to 120%. So obviously, if it increases the item by 80%, it's actually going to go down. But there is a chance that it's going to increase the values of an item, right? So for example, by 120%. So you're going to get even items that are all tier 1 and then times 20%, so they're going to get even better. Now, what he's saying is, if these items are mirrorable, because the way it specifies in the wording right now is that not all, but some items will be, currency items will be usable on sanctified items. If that's going to happen, it's going to distort the economy and make things really, really strange. But we'll have to see how that goes. I'll just put a link in this video. He explained it a lot better. But yeah, the implementation of this new Omen of Sanctification is very much probably going to determine the economy in the long run. And then one other change is, oh yeah, we got Hinakor's Lock. So if you know this one from Path of Exile 1, if you use this on an item, it sort of foresees the changes that you're going to get with other currency items. So basically, you're going to use a lock on an item like this belt, then it becomes purple. Then you can use all your other currencies, for example, an Exalted Orb, a Chaos Orb, a Vow Orb. You can click them and then hover over this item, and then it shows you what the effect will be if you would use that item on this belt. So this is very important for sort of like long-term deterministic crafting in order to create perfect items. And yeah, this is going to be an incredibly expensive item. I foresee it's definitely going to be an end game sort of like mirror tier crafting tool. The same applies in Path of Exile 1. So if you have one of these, keep it, right? Only sell it when you really need it. But if you find one of these, you can probably fund your whole build, right? I don't know where they're going to drop yet, but getting one of these, it's probably going to be very rare. And if you got one, you're rich. You're very rich. Then we got a lot of new items. Well, actually not that many. I think in terms of unique items, we're going to get only 10. Just have a quick look at them. So this one is very cool. We got this in Path of Exile 1 also. Yeah, we'll have to see how they're going to use this one. It's not widely used. There's some niche builds that use this. This one will be interesting. This it gives you a new skill, Crackling Palm. And it gives you some damage to unarmed melee hits. So this is definitely going to be combined with the Hollow Palm Keystone that we're going to get. And you're going to get some crit chance. So these will be very interesting. And these are probably going to be used by a lot of people. And what we're also going to get is a lot of new different base items. that are, you know, related to the new style and artwork that we're gonna get. So this, for example, the two-handed mace. This one is, you know, it's the Karui themed style, right? Very, very cool. More items is always better, right? Because we're gonna get a lot more toys to play with. And then what else we have here? Yeah, you know, a bunch of new endgame maps, right? Again, more is better. And, you know, a lot more articles. Like, for example, this one you'll find is on the Atlas right now. For example, a Wild Sandstorm or a Maelstrom right here, right? And these are used, once again, new mechanics in the Atlas. These are going to be fun to explore. So yeah, I cannot wait. Oh yeah, and these ones. Lineage support gems. Now, there are some of them. I think we're going to get 40 lineage support gems. And these are very special and sometimes extremely powerful version of support gems, right? Now, think of them as like unique item, but for supports, right? So they are available in the regular drop pool, right? You rarely might find one. Some will probably be farmable from specific bosses. And I think a lot of these will be like build defining, right? Like there will be crazy power upgrades. And let's just have a look at these ones, right? So this one, Zarok's Refrain, spells echo 2 times, very powerful. And then this one, Rakiata's Flow. Now, just want to talk about this one quickly, because this one I think is absolutely busted, right? So what this says is hits with supported skills treat enemy monster elemental resistance values as inverted, right? So imagine a monster like T4 Jest has 75 lightning resist. Now instead, just with this support gem only, just this only, it now has minus 75 resist, right? That's incredibly hard to get in a normal game with all your other tools. So if you have this support gem on your main skill, right, you don't have to invest, you know, passive points into penetration, right? You don't have to run a curse, right? You don't have to invest in exposure, right? This on a base level will give you 700% more damage. Now, under normal circumstances, you're probably gonna run exposure, right? A curse and things like penetration. So all in all, in general, it would give maybe 75% more damage. But the thing is, when you have this item, right? When you have the support gem, you don't have to invest all these points or like modifiers into things like penetration, exposure, curses, etc. So I think this one is going to be very, very, very expensive. Hopefully we can sort of target farm it. But if it's going to be target farmable from a certain boss, then the way to access this boss is going to be incredibly expensive. I think this is going to be one of the most expensive items of the whole league because, if you have an elemental build, if you do any elemental damage, this is going to be absolutely busted. Right? And then, this is an interesting one. This just for crossbow skills, and we'll have to see, but this might be a massive sort of like quality of life improvement. And then, this is also, honestly, I'm not sure, because I said the support gem system overall is going to be the biggest change. I might have to take my words back because asynchronous offline trade, right? Now we don't have to both be online to trade. You can create your own little mini market, right? You can trade with people who are offline. They can just come into your hideout. They can buy the item that you put up. I might have to take my words back. This might be the biggest change for this patch. I think it's absolutely going to be crazy. And imagine this, right? Right now, you don't have to be online to sell your items. And a person you're buying items from also doesn't have to be online, right? Now, normally, maybe only 20-25% of the people who are playing in the league are actually going to be online, right? And then people realize that it's much easier to sell items, so you're going to get a lot more items you're going to put up for trade. Because you don't have to be there, you don't have to port out of your map, you don't have to interact with somebody, right? So I think we're going to get maybe 10, 15, 20 times more items to trade. I think this is going to be a massive boon for the economy. And basically, if it's up to me, right, this change and the support gem system overall is going to completely rework the game. And obviously this is going to be a trial, so if this works well, they're going to put it in the Path of Exile 1. I think this is going to be massive. right? So these were sort of the big changes that they announced on the website, right? I'm going to go through the patch notes right now. I'm not going to go through them like this. I made a little presentation, and I'm going to tell you what the biggest changes are. So let's get to it. Right, I got myself a coffee, and let's go through the patch note summary. Right, so I'm going to talk about the most important changes. I cannot really talk about all of them because there are just going to be so many, but I'm going to highlight the ones that I think are going to be the most relevant ones. We're going to do a little deep dive into sort of the changes that is going to happen, especially in terms of ascendancies and certain important skills. Then I'm going to give a couple of meta predictions. You know, a couple of these things are probably wrong, right? I don't have an amazing eye on what's going to happen in the game. There's still a lot of numbers on new skills and reworks are unknown. There's a lot of items and support gems that are not known yet. But, you know, based on what we know, I'm just going to give an idea of what I think will happen. And then we're definitely going to talk about all the Ascendancy buffs and nerfs, because this is definitely going to determine the meta, right? And then what I'm going to league start. And I'll be honest, I'm still not sure, because there's so many new cool toys to play with that probably until 2 hours before the league is going to start, I'm still doubting. Right, so let's reiterate one of the most important changes. The support gem system overall. So there's going to be no more limit on the support gems, right? This is going to open up, I think, a lot more build variability, because you can use good support gems for every skill that you have. Basically, you can use the best ones, and I think this is going to open up a lot more sort of like multi-skill gameplay. Then they're going to have different tiers, so right, for example, many support gems are going to now have different tiers. They're going to grow with you as you level, and some of them are going to have unique effects. We're going to have 11 new support gems. So once again, more is better. More toys to play with. I love it. And then 40 lineage supports. Some of these I think are going to be absolutely busted. They're going to be very rare. But these are definitely going to be defining the meta and changing the game a lot. Another thing is the crafting system. You basically, in POE2 right now, you had, you know, low to low mid-tier sort of like items, right? But then if you wanted the best of the best, you needed very expensive omens and other types of currency that were basically out of reach for 99.9% of the people. So I think, you know, introduction of the tiered currency is definitely going to open up a lot of opportunities for the average player to get pretty good to very good items, right? And I think some of these, like the tiered currencies, the essence tiers, which are determinate recalls basically, and then you know, the omen changes are going to be very important. One thing though, and I talked about it before, Omen of Sanctification, the way this is going to be implemented is, I think, basically going to affect the economy a lot. And long story short, I hope that once an item is sanctified, right, it's going to get a special tag like corrupted or mirrored, right? I hope that that item will not be mirrorable, because if it is, then basically you can sort of ladder craft to the best item possible, and then the first, you know, group of people who has the best item possible can put it up for mirror crafting. The way they're going to use the proceeds from that, they're going to use those proceeds to buy all the crafting currency to make more, and basically it's very much going to damage the economy, I think, in the long run. I'll put the link down below of Belton's video. He explains a lot better, but I really hope that we're going to get a competitor to mirror crafting. Because if these items that are going to be way better than normal rare items, if you can mirror them, then, you know, a mirror is always going to be the best and the most important sort of like crafting currency. And if it's not the case, you cannot mirror these items, then we actually have some sort of like competitor to mirror crafting. So I really hope these items are not mirrorable. Then we got a couple of new keystones, and one of them here is going to be super interesting, Hollow Palm Technique. Because this one, basically it allows you to be unarmed. So a good thing about this is now you don't need to care about your weapon anymore, right? You're going to get all the power from your passive tree or this keystone. So basically it doesn't matter. You don't need to look for a good weapon, so you can invest your currency and time into other items. And I think this is going to be a very, very popular build. A lot of people have been very interested in it. And yeah, I think it's sort of a fantasy that a lot of people have, right? So sort of like the after Ang, I think a lot of people are gonna play Monk, maybe Invoker with this stuff. But yeah, unarmed is definitely going to be something. And then another new keystone, Walk of the Wilds. So Mana Leech now recover based on elemental damage instead of physical damage. And the way they're gonna rework Leech is basically, I think, if you're on the right side of the tree, if you're gonna take this keystone, then for the most case, probably your Mana Leech is going to be sovered, right? You don't have to worry that much about mana, unless maybe you got like very, very high in the end game, or very, very high level of skills. Then there's a little bit of text here from the patch notes. Ritual Cadence. This keystone changes your invocations to trigger every 2 seconds instead of all at once. But trigger skills consume less energy. Yeah, I think this is gonna go open up some sort of like auto bomber builds. I'm really excited to see what we're gonna get with that. But yeah, it's very hard to theory craft with these kind of things because there's so many things not known yet. Then another very cool keystone here in the northwest section of the Witch's Sorcery, Black Flame Covenant. So basically this converts all your fire damage to chaos, and this damage also contributes to ignite chance and magnitude. So we're gonna get some sort of like chaos ignite builds, and yeah, this is gonna be a lot of fun. I'm very excited to see what kind of builds we're gonna get with that. Alright, some other keystones that have been changed. Giant's Blood has been nerfed, and now it grants half the amount of life granted by strength. I think this is very unfortunate. Life-based builds already were a little bit underwhelming, I think, especially in comparison to the buffs we're gonna get for the right side of the tree with evasion and energy shield. And I personally am a little bit disappointed in this, and this is one of the main reasons why also a lot of people say that yeah, warrior builds are nerfed heavily. Glancing Blows has been changed, so now chance to evade is unlucky and chance to deflect is lucky. No longer provides block chances doubled or take 50% of damage from blocked hits. This is going to be interesting. I think deflect is going to be one of the biggest changes for the right side of the tree in terms of builds that we're going to get. Depending on how it sort of appears on items, right? If it's only going to appear on pure dex items, then it's going to have a little bit less of an impact. But I think deflect is going to be very, very strong. We're going to talk about it later. And then to make this chance lucky, and then unlucky for evade chance, I think this is going to be a very good keystone to take for pure dex builds. And so yeah, this is another buff for the right side of the tree. Resolute Keystone has been changed, so now double accuracy rating. I think for most builds on the left side, you're probably not going to have to worry too much about accuracy rating with all the other buffs. And I think that's fair enough because, you know, you already have to stand very close to an enemy when you're melee. So I think these are good changes. Elemental Equilibrium has been redesigned, and now it grants infusions that you're going to get to be random. We'll talk about these later, but these infusions is a new mechanic for casters mainly, for the top side of the tree. And I think we're going to get a lot of cool fun builds with it. So this is going to be interesting. It's probably a nice keystone to grab when you're in that area, because it just opens up a little bit more multi-element playstyle. Right, other endgame content that has been changed is now we're going to have splinters, right? So remember when you run Delirium, right? You get like the Delirium splinters, and then you have to hand in like 100 and you get a Simulacrum. What they're going to do now is now for all tiers of content, so all, for example, the Crux of Nothingness or Breach, right, the Delirium, you're just going to get a bunch of splinters. And the lowest tier, you're going to need maybe 25 splinters to access. And then tier 2, you need 50. Tier 3, you need 75. And tier 4, you need 100 splinters, right? And the idea is that it's just going to be a lot more easily accessible to get to these sort of like lower tiers. And it's not going to be more beneficial for most players to just sell the splinters and let somebody else with a good build run them and use the proceeds for your own build. I think it's going to be good. We'll have to see how it goes. Okay, Arbiter of Ash has been reworked. So basically, you're not going to have one tier only, right? Not like with the, there's no Atlas tree anymore for Arbiter of Ash. And basically, the rewards that you're going to get from Arbiter of Ash are going to be similar to the tier 4 rewards that you used to get 0.2. But we're also now going to get uber arbiter fast. So we're probably gonna get more and better rewards. But yeah, you're only gonna get this if I think your Atlas tree is completely filled in, and you need like different items for this to access it. Waystones are also going to be reworked. Basically, now you're not gonna have like positive sort of like prefixes and negative suffixes. Every modifier on your waystone is going to have both a positive and a negative aspect, and they have some upsides and some downsides. So it's probably going to be the case that, you know, items that have, waystones that have 6 modifiers are going to be the meta, and you probably want to corrupt them always in order to get a couple more. So there's a little bit more of an exalt sync for these kind of things, and I think overall it's probably a better way to run maps, but we'll have to see, right? It's a lot more similar than what you're gonna get. Yeah, it's a lot more similar than what we've got in Path of Exile 1. And then also we're now gonna get new bases, right? So you're gonna be able to drop bases that are called exceptional, and they can have up to 30% quality or an extra socket, right? And I know maybe you can have both. I'm not sure about it. But it's going to be interesting because you're getting a lot more better bases to craft with, right? Or maybe, a wand that already has 2 sockets, and then if you're lucky with a Valorp, you get a 3rd socket on it. That's going to be very interesting. Once again, more tools to work with. I think it's fun for everybody, so definitely excited about this change. All the general improvements that we have is the skill gems can now be sold for gold and traded on the exchange. I think it's a big improvement overall. At some point you definitely get too many skill gems, and now you got another source to get some gold. And you're definitely gonna need a lot of gold because trading is going to cost gold, as well as using the currency exchange. So more gold is definitely better. So yeah, they're very good. We're gonna get sprinting, obviously. We'll see how that works out, but I think it's an improvement. Thank God, one of the things that many people wanted and expected actually also is attribute requirements have gone down by 20 to 25% overall. They were definitely a little bit restrictive, and so this is going to open up a lot more opportunities for, using different items or just overall variability in builds. And also weapon swap is now instant. So you don't have to spec it anymore if you want to weapon swap very often. And it's also not going to limit your gameplay. I think this is again a big W for build variability. Alright, exposure has been nerfed. Ignite has been changed. So now fire damage instead is going to build up flammability. And once you reach 100 flammability, you're going to ignite the target. Shock has been reworked, so now, well, it's not reworked. Now it lasts 8 seconds on enemies instead of 4 seconds. And I think this is a big change because 4 seconds was a little bit short, and now it's a lot more easily incorporable in many builds, because if you have actually shocked an enemy, you want to make use of it. And 4 seconds often felt a little bit short, even though oftentimes in the tree you spec a little bit into things like ailment or shock duration. The same for chill. However, chill magnitude is now at least 30%, right? From 5%. Basically, it means that very slow sort of chill effects are now not very easily incorporated in builds, right? You cannot have like 5 or 10% chill magnitude. Anything under 30% is just regarded as 0. So you're definitely going to have to do a decent amount of cold damage in order to actually benefit from chill. But if you do, 30% chill magnitude is definitely very beneficial in terms of defense. So I think we're going to see a lot more multi-element builds. And I think cold is definitely going to benefit from this. So it just requires a little bit more investment, right? And then there's a new mechanic for casters, really, and that's going to be infusions. So these many skills create infusions from a specific element as remnants on the ground. You can pick them up, and then you can consume these with other skills to get bonus effects, right? So I think there's going to be a couple of very interesting builds that combine using infusions for different skills to boost them, and I'm very excited about this. One of the ascendancies that I'm very interested in playing is going to be Stormweaver, using many different cross-elemental infusions and skills, and maybe have some sort of like tri-elemental build with frost, lightning, and fire. I think that's going to be very, very cool. Then curses and exposure, they have been buffed a little bit. I mean, exposure has been nerfed, but curses have been buffed a little bit. And now the fun thing is you're not going to have a curse for every different element. They just, you have one curse now. It's called Elemental Weakness, and it applies to all 3 of the elements, right? And the effect is going to be roughly doubled. However, as you can see down here in the text below, higher rare enemies are now less affected by curses. So 50% less effect on magic monsters and 30% less effect on rare monsters. And a whopping 50% less effect on unique monsters. So basically, the effect is going to be the same. But the nice thing is now it's a barrier, for multi-element playstyle, right? It's gone because you can just use Elemental Weakness, and it doesn't matter if you cast a cold or fire spell. Both will have the same amount of reduced resistance. That's going to be very good. Exposure also, it has been nerfed, but also it's been reworked in the sense that exposure is just exposure, right? It's not fire exposure or cold exposure. If they are exposed, it's going to be to all 3 of the elements. Then block. Now block is interesting because I think it's buffed. I'm not really sure. I might be wrong here, right? But basically the way it was is that it would only block, I think, physical hits, right? But now it can basically block all hits. I'm not sure about damage over time or ground effects, but it's definitely sort of buffed in a way that, it can block all hits, except the hits that are not supposed to be blockable ever. And these are basically red, sort of telegraphed abilities by bosses, right? Now, in order to counteract this effect, they needed to reduce the max block chance from 75 to 50%, because otherwise 75% chance to block basically all hits is going to be very OP. And as a result also, they nerfed a lot of block values on shields. Now, minions, I think minion players are eating very, very good. There were definitely some sort of like niche minion builds that were very good, right? A lot of people played Storm Mages, but I haven't seen that many more other minion builds recently. I'm sure there were, but I think overall a lot of minions got a lot of buffs and reworks. So I have to see how it's going to work out. But basically, they're now going to always hit with attacks, so you don't have to worry about accuracy rating anymore. Many minion skills have been buffed. Specters have been reworked, and they get now 45% more damage, as well as their costs are changed. So who knows, we might actually see a couple of cool Spectre builds coming out right now. And I think in general, with a lot of the reworks, I think there's going to be a lot more sort of like multi-minion playstyle, right? So maybe you're going to have like, 2 clerics, right? A couple of melee minions, a Storm Mage, just a bunch of different minions that are going to buff and affect each other in a cool way. And I've always been a big fan of like a minion army build, right? I thought it was a bit lame if you play a minion build and you just play like 10 Storm Mages. Yeah, it is very strong and cool, but I do like that idea of sort of like a cool zombie minion army with a bunch of different skeletal minions and things like that. Then let's talk about all the ascendancies. I cannot talk about all the changes, right? But I'm just going to give you my idea of if they're buffed or nerfed, what I think, what kind of builds they're going to be good for, and what is some interesting change that is causing this. So I think the Warbringer, right, it has been buffed, I think, right? It's going to be good for totem builds, war cries, block-based builds. And what you can see, for example, here is now this notable grants 35% base chance to block from equipped shield instead of whatever the shield's value is, right? So remember that the max block chance has now been 50%. With this, you're already 35%. So you only need about 50% increased block chance to get to max block. Now, another notable here is that you get less block chance. No, it's been changed. Basically, what it now provides is you take 30% of the damage from blocked hits, but your maximum block chance is back to 75%. So if you start here at 35%, right, you only need like 115 to 120% increased block chance from nodes like your passive tree or items, and then you reach the max of 75% block chance. However, every time you block a hit, you're gonna take 30% of damage. I do think still this is overall a good buff, right? This is probably going to be a very tanky ascendancy. Okay, the Smith of Kitava. This is one of the few that I think is nerfed. It was very strong in 0.2. A lot of people enjoyed it. And I don't know what it's going to be good for. It's just kind of average. You might be able to reach high defenses, right, with high armor and high elemental resistances, as well as the ability to sort of convert some of the armor values to mitigating elemental damage from hits. But all in all, yeah, I don't know about this one. I think it's nerfed. I don't think we're going to see a lot of people playing it. Although the thing is, there's always a couple of hardcore warrior players. So we'll see. Who knows? Maybe they'll find out something cool. Because a lot of skills are being reworked. And I did see some of the footage from like these sort of like lava fissure skills. Who knows? Maybe we got some good builds coming. Then the Jamming Legionnaire. This was already a very good Ascendancy, right? But I think it's been buffed, right? And what's it going to be good for? I think it's going to be good for builds that are going to be using multiple charges at the same time, right? So it's going to use and power charges and the green charges, what are they called again? And endurance charges, right? As well as multiple skill types, right? Because, for example, it now here as a node in the Ascendancy, which basically gives you a chance every 8 seconds to generate a power, frenzy, or endurance charge. And the type of charge you generate is determined by the attribute requirements of your socketed skill gems. Right, so this is sort of a chance. So there's probably a higher chance that you're going to get endurance charges if the required, strength for all your skills is going to be much higher. But still, you're not going to probably determinatively always get endurance charges. And also you're going to get, with another node, you get, for each color of socketed skill gem that is most numerous, you're going to get certain bonuses. So what's interesting about this is that you can use, for example, 3 red, 3 blue, and 3 green skill gems, and then you get all these 3 buffs, right? So it's definitely going to be the type of Ascendancy that is favoring using multiple different charges, so sort of like payoff skills and different skill types. I think it's going to be good for a couple of niche builds, and who knows, maybe some very overpowered ones. The Tactician has been buffed. It was already kind of alright, but I think overall it did get some buffs. For me, this one is a bit hard to predict. I didn't really play this one much, but I think it's going to be good for totem builds. Glory, I haven't really figured this mechanic out, but I think it's going to be interesting, as well as banners. And so one cool thing is that here it's going to get deflection rating equal to 20% of armor, which is cool because I think deflection is not going to be normally associated with armor. But you don't get any extra stun threshold. Deflect is going to be very strong, so this is going to be probably very decent notable. And then this one, whoever places best notable passive spell. So there's no more limit on the number of banners you can place, and you gain 5 glory per second. Banners gain 5 glory per second. So, yeah, not sure about this glory playstyle, but I think there's going to be some niche, interesting builds with glory and banners. The Ritualist, this is very interesting. It was kind of always like, a little bit more of like the caster style version of the Amazon, right? A little bit more versatile, a little bit more spell-based. And so I think this one is once again going to be good for versatility, right? If you're only going to play one Ascendancy and you want to be very versatile, maybe change different skills, this is never going to be a bad choice. It's going to be good for mapping. And obviously you're going to get +1 ring slot and increased effect of ring slots. Because if you look here, the Ask the Whispers, Ask Notable has been removed, and As the Whispers Demand Notable now also grants the Ritual Sacrifice skill. Now what Ritual Sacrifice skill does is it basically allows you to sacrifice a rare monster that you've just killed, and you gain their modifiers. So it's like a sort of like Headhunter buff on demand, right? So you get a lot of upfront power from this, and if you kill monsters very fast, right, during mapping, you can just activate this a bunch of time, get their modifiers, use some support gems in here to increase the duration of these buffs, and you're probably going to have a very good sort of like basic mapping build. Might be very strong, and I think it's going to be very enticing for people who like this kind of like playstyle. Right, and then the Amazon. The Amazon has been nerfed, and thank God, 30 to 40% of the people played this last patch, and it was just way too strong. It's still going to be good for spear builds or crit based style, and I think we're going to get some new builds for the Amazon for sure. The fact that you get a lot of crit is still great, but you just got way too much, so this has been taken down. This notable from 25 to 15%. There's still going to be very good builds for the Amazon. It's just going to take him back a little bit because it was absolutely busted. The Pathfinder, I think this one has been buffed. What it's going to get here. So now you get 50% of evasion rating, also grants elemental damage reduction. This was previously 30, so this is just a straight up buff. And then they reworked the concoctions, right? And now poisonous concoction is quite interesting. Basically what it does is you get an acidic concoction. That's a new name. And once you cast it, you get an acidic burst, and that deals unscalable physical damage equal to 150% of the expected remaining damage of the consumed poison. So basically what you can do is you can just stack a bunch of poisons, right, on enemies, and just stack poison effect, magnitude, and duration, and then you can slam a couple of these acidic concoctions on them to consume these poisons, and instead of over time, you're gonna deal this damage immediately. But the cool thing about this is that you get 30% more area of effect per poison affecting the enemy, right? So you want to combine this with, maybe another skill that quickly stacks up a lot of poisons. Then you use your acidic concoction and just get a massive, massive area of effect. So this will actually be very interesting. Hopefully we can get some very cool and niche builds. And yeah, so this is going to be good for speed, poison, and concoctions, I think. The Deadeye, this is going to be the big winner of the patch, I think. It was already very, very, very strong. And it just got buffed again. And so yeah, I think this is definitely going to be the meta, right, for most people. It's got a lot of inherent speed already. It's going to be very good for bows and crossbows. And yeah, it's just very strong overall. This one, it's definitely... I think we're going to go into a bow league. And I'll show you later why. But a couple of things have been reworked. So first of all, marks have been changed. So now marks are not a spell, right? There's something else. But they're basically nerfed for everybody else, except for the Deadeye. For the Deadeyes, they're buffed. So they're going to get... the called shots no longer lets you apply an additional mark, but instead it causes your projectiles to chain to mark the enemies. And it grants a new called shots meta skill that repeatedly marks enemies near you. So basically, when you're walking around, this skill sort of marks nearby enemies, and then any projectile that you shoot is going to chain towards them. It's passive. I think that's just absolutely busted, because you don't have to do anything, you're just gonna get a lot more power from it. And then Eagle Eyes has been reworked, and now instead it applies 20 stacks of critical weakness to enemies when you consume a mark on them. Right, so this is going to be a mark-based playstyle. This allows you to easier going to crit, and crit is already basically the strongest way to skill endgame builds. So yeah, Deadeye is going to be absolutely busted. It's been buffed, and it was already very, very strong. Invoker, I think this one has been buffed too. It was already pretty strong, just not a lot of people used it. Right, but the hollow palm technique keystone is now available, and I think a lot of people are going to play it. And yeah, it's still going to be good for unarmed or quarterstaves. You have an interesting buff here. You're going to get a little bit more damage from this Ascendancy node, but only 3% of people use this one in 0.2, so we're going to see if this is going to increase the use of this Ascendancy keystone. But yeah, still a little buff is nice, right? Then the Acolyte of Chula. Now this one has been buffed pretty big. And it's kind of been reworked too, because basically nobody played this, right? It was the least played Ascendancy in 0.2. And there were some interesting builds with it, right? But a lot of the nodes on the Ascendancy tree were either very bad, or they kind of like funneled you into one direction only. There was not a lot of choice, just an illusion of choice. A lot of things have been rebuilt, but basically It's going to be good for chaos damage and leech. And yeah, it's going to be a dark horse, right? It's hard to predict what this is going to be, but I personally think a lot of people might start this, right? So I think with the buffs to the right side of the tree, with deflect, unarmed, and then the rework of this Ascendancy, I think a lot of people are going to play Acolyte of Chula. Then the Blood Mage, it's also been buffed. Now, this was already a very strong Ascendancy, right? There were a bunch of bleed builds using Rake. Crit, right? There were a couple of one-shots builds. And physical damage-based spell casters. That was the Blood Mage was good for. So, basically, you're going to get 2 extra Ascendancy points for this one. Because the Sanguinancy notable is now free to allocate. And then what do we get here? This is interesting. Basically, it's going to consume your life charges, life flask charges when they reach full. And you get 1% of damage as physical damage for 3 seconds per charge consumed. So you want to have life flasks with a lot of different charges. And then using this, you're going to get life flask charges. And when they reach full, you're going to get a bunch of extra damage. I think Blood Mage was already very, very strong, and they're buffed again. So anybody who plays this build, it's going to be a lot of fun. Infernalist, this one's been buffed too. It's going to be good for minions, and perhaps now Demon Form, because Demon Form used to not use your weapon, right? So if you were in Demon Form, it didn't really matter if you had a weapon. You just didn't use those skills, or sorry, those stats, but now it will, right? So that's going to be very, very good. The Lich is going to be great for Chaos, right? Or Chaos Dot and minions. And remember the changed Keystone. Now you're going to get Chaos Ignite based builds. And I think Lich is going to be the main choice for this one. And it's still also going to be good for minions, right? There's been a notable that have been changed here. So now when you consume a power charge, you deal 40% more damage instead of 25%. So I'm going to predict there are going to be some Lich-based Chaos Ignite skill builds that are going to stack power charges, consume them to deal a shit ton more damage. And so Chaos Ignite is definitely going to be one of the builds that we're going to see with Lich. Alright, the Chronomancer, I think this one being buffed a little bit. It still has some cool builds like the Time Rewind right option. But still, I do think it's going to be niche and outshadowed by the Stormweaver. But who knows, there are probably some multi-element playstyles available with this one, right? As well as do love the effect of slowing down your enemies around you and maybe recoup. So I think we're still going to be seeing some niche crazy builds with this one. Then the Stormweaver. I love the north side of the tree. Personally, I'm usually a caster type player. I did play Deadeye in the last update, but I do love Stormweaver, so I'm still not sure what to play. This one has been buffed, and I think we're going to see a lot of cool Autobomber style, maybe multi-element playstyle builds using infusions, maybe a little bit more mana stacking, right? They have buffed Archmage a tiny bit, the reworked Arc. And so yeah, I'm actually personally very excited to have a look at Stormweaver and see what we can do with this. What we've got here, so basically some notables have been buffed to make a bit more use of mana stacking and the combination of Arcane Surge. And then here they've reworked the Elemental Storm, and now also what does it say? No longer 40% of damage, elemental damage taken recouped as energy shield. Yeah, that was shit. But what we get right now is 50% chance when collecting an elemental infusion to gain another different elemental infusion. So yeah, this is going to be big. If you're going to use elemental infusions, you definitely want to pick this up. And yeah, once again, I'm very excited. I think I'm going to play with this one for a while. Other things. So we got a lot of passive skill tree changes. We don't know them yet, right? So that's going to be interesting. They're not going to be on POB. Everybody is going to see them at the same time when the update launches. So no way to know what happens. But as you can see, we got a bunch of new clusters on the left side of the tree. And then, yeah, just a lot of different clusters in many, many other areas. So it's going to be a lot more similar than Path of Exile 1. And yeah, I just think it's going to be a massive improvement. Skill changes. Now, in general, most skill damage has been increased in the end game. So what that means is they just buffed the numbers basically, and for early game or end game or mid game, not so much. But for level 20 skill gem, you're going to see roughly 5% increase in damage, or 5% more. And then at level 30, it's about 30%. No, at level 30, skill gem is going to have roughly 20% more damage than what it used to have before. And then also they reduced skill mana cost a little bit in the end game. So once again, I think this is good because in some situations, the mana skill costs in the end game were just absolutely ridiculous. We're gonna have no more shenanigans with Blink, Convalescence, or Sacrifice in your second weapon set. So all in all, I think pretty fair. This one was just bound to happen, really, because that's not what it's meant to be for. Mark skills are no longer skills, or they are no longer spells. Yeah, overall, I think this is just going to be a nerf for everybody using mark skills, except for the Deadeye. Yeah, they're going to have a buff. And then many skills have been reworked, right? It's just way too much to go over, right? You're just going to have to look into the patch notes yourself. But there are a couple of ones that I just want to highlight, right? So Cast on Freeze, or Cast on Shock and Cast on Ignite have been combined to do a single gem, right? Once again, they've removed the barriers for focusing on multi-element playstyle, right? And so hopefully, at least that's what they're working towards, they're going to open up the possibilities to easily scale and play with different elements. So lightning, fire, and cold. And I'm very excited about that. Ancestral Warrior Totem has been reworked. Basically, no more limit, but you need 3 endurance charges to raise. So we're definitely going to have some cool totem builds, but you will have to generate a lot of endurance charges to do that. I think it's going to be cool, and I think totems is going to be one of these archetypes that we're going to see this patch for sure. You know, there are just a lot of people that like the totem playstyle. It's definitely, if it's strong, there's just a lot of people who love this kind of playstyle. Arc has been reworked. I'm excited about this one. It has a more shock magnitude, which, you know, that's just more damage. And overall, it's not a payoff skill anymore. It's just a castable skill. So I'm very excited about that one, because also it's going to be able to consume an infusion. Archmage has been changed also, so now it grants 4% of damage, extra lightning damage for each 100% 100 maximum mana. So it's been increased by about a third, right? Then banners have been buffed. As I said, multi-element playstyle has been buffed, especially when you combine this with infusion. I think this is going to be the route of many builds. Crossbow skills, many crossbow skills have been buffed, as well as crossbow reload speed. So I think overall, crossbows were already pretty good. They're buffed again, just a little bit, I think. Hair of Thunder. Almost every build uses that in 0.2, and it's been nerfed. So the impact radius, it's been taken down from 1.4 to 1, which I think is fair, because it was very strong. Yeah, banners have been buffed. Rake and Stomping Ground. This was basically the leveling meta in 0.2 once people figured it out, and that has been nerfed heavily. And yeah, we're gonna see what's gonna develop right now, but Shield Charge has been reworked. And I'm thinking maybe we're going to get a shield charge plus Stomping Ground meta. So Stomping Ground meta, a Stomping Ground is still very strong. You're just going to deal a lot of damage based on your strength. And the way shield charge has been reworked, you can see it down here. I think, who knows, you're just going to be shield charging through packs of enemies with Stomping Ground. And that's how it's going to do a lot of damage. And that's how you'll quickly move through the zones and level. I think this might be interesting. Lightning Spear, thank God this has been nerfed. I didn't play it. I just think it was kind of boring, even though it was very strong, right? But I don't know. I'm just the kind of person who doesn't really like to play the same thing that everybody else plays, right? So if more than 50% of the player base plays Lightning Spear, I just don't see the interest in it, right? But the fact that it was so incredibly strong, and maybe 60 to 70% of the player base used it, yeah, it really needed some nerfs. So that kind of playstyle kind of got the triple tap, right? So Ascendancies that were using it have been nerfed a little bit, especially the Amazon. Yeah, and now it fires only 5 secondary bolts at all levels. So the power level has been taken down a lot. And Wind Serpent's Fury, one of these sort of like one-shot skills, is also being nerfed because it no longer causes shockwaves when enemy are hit into walls. And these shockwaves used to do a lot of damage. So hopefully this is sort of taking that spell out of like the, the one-shot territory. Maybe I'm misunderstanding this wrong, right? It could be, right? Maybe I'm just making a mistake here. Please don't pin me on it. But I think this is a nerf in order to sort of remove this skill as like a one-shot mechanic for endgame bosses. We got a bunch of cool new unique items, right? We already talked about this one, the belt. I think that's going to be very, very interesting. In all honesty, the way me looking at this, I think this is going to be one of the new meta builds, especially if you get very good socketed items and then you get a high value on this increased effect. I think that's definitely going to be one of the end game belts that people are going to have. This is going to be very cool, the Hinekor sight. This basically allows you to avoid some damage. There's been a bit of this in the trailer. And then we're going to get a new Timeless Jewel that's going to sort of like conquer your passive tree as like an abyss. Yeah, it's very hard to predict, but usually these Timeless Jewels are going to be very, very powerful in the end game when they sort of change the right nodes and notables on your passive tree. And I kind of predict also these ones to be a good source for farming and going to be very, very cool end game scaling way for your build. But you're definitely going to have to spend a lot of time finding the right one. So we'll see how that pans out. Other unique items that have been nerfed, right? So first of all, Tangle Tongue, right? This was literally the best, probably the best item in 0.2, right? And it was also very, very accessible. It was like, I don't know, tier 3 or tier 2 unique, right? Very common. I found a lot of these. And yeah, it's been nerfed heavily. So basically, instead of 5 to 8%, no, instead of 10 to 20% critical hit chance, is now give 5 to 8. I think it's still going to be very, very good, especially for the mid game or early end game. But definitely a rare spear later on will be just much better. But I do like the fact that they didn't remove the fork's critical hits, because that was sort of the unique part about the whole weapon, right? So I'm very happy they kept that, but they definitely needed to take down the critical hit chance. Then Effigy of Cruelty. This was just a very convenient way for many, many builds to stack critical weakness on the enemy, right? And so this has been nerfed a little bit. I think still with many multi-hit spells like Ball of Lightning, this will still be a very viable way to stack critical weakness on enemies, but it's definitely been nerfed a little bit. So this is a notable nerf that a lot of people are going to see. And then there's a bunch of interesting, unique items that are just not going to be available at release, right? And a couple of interesting things. The Inferno class that gave you +5 max fire resistance. That can give you +5 max fire resistance. Again, a nerf to the left side, right? Warrior side of the tree. A lot of Smith of Kitava builds use this. Or look at this one, right? The Deepest Tower. Now, this item was absolutely build defining. It opened up a lot of cool builds for the left side of the tree, right? The warrior or like the south side of the tree. And this item is also not available right now. Another indirect nerf to that area of the tree. And so I think the big winner for this patch is definitely going to be, the right side, right? Like Amazon, Ranger builds, Monk builds, and perhaps the top side of the tree. But definitely that side. Then other items changes. Many runes and soul cores have been adjusted. And I just want to put attention on this rune, right? This came later on in 0.2.1. Bow attacks fire an additional arrow. Now, I think this one is basically going to guarantee that we're going to be in a bow meta, right? Deadeye's been buffed. This rune is incredibly strong. One additional arrow. I think this one is going to be very, very valuable. And this is just going to determine that a lot of bow-based builds are going to be incredibly, incredibly strong. Crit damage modifiers have been reduced slightly. Overall, this was good because crit and crit damage has basically been the way for any endgame build to truly scale. And so I do like the fact that they've taken that down a little bit, so it's just a little bit less obvious. Once again, block chance values have been reduced, and also staves as an item have been buffed. Basically, they were never as strong as using a focus and a wand, but they have buffed roughly 50% of the they increased the modifier values about 50% for staves, and hopefully they're now in line with things like a focus and a wand. And then deflect. Now this is going to be very, very interesting, right? So what you're going to get right now on strength armors, and I'm not entirely sure, I think the warning is quite precise, so this means only armors that require only strength, and now new suffix modifiers for armors that only require dex, so not like dex int or like dex strength. They have a chance to get deflection rating based on your evasion rating, right? So armor items are going to get a modifier that basically reduces the elemental damage you take based on armor, and then you're going to get deflection rating when you have evasion items, right? This one, not so interesting, right? Faster start of energy, shield recharge, whatever, right? But deflect, look here. Deflection rating provides a chance to deflect damage from hits. From all hits, right? So this is like spell suppression in Path of Exile 1, except it's way better, right? Because it's all hits. Now, I don't think this is going to apply to dots, or I don't know about ground effects, but we'll have to see. But I'm going to promise you, this is going to be better than spell suppression. Now, spell suppression usually prevents 50% of the damage. This only prevents 40%, but still, I think it's going to be better. And this is one of the main reasons why, once again, the right side of the tree, any build that uses, that can use deflect, is going to be buffed heavily. We'll still have to see how this pans out, because the line here in the bottom says exact chance to deflect also depends on the attacker's accuracy. And by the way, you can stack this to 100%, right? But still, it will depend on the attacker's accuracy. But that also means that you can, for example, use some jewels with apply blind on hit, and then when enemies are blinded, right, their accuracy is reduced, and then you get increased deflect chance, right? You combine that with builds that already naturally stay at a distance because you use a ranged weapon. I think this is going to be incredibly strong as a defense mechanic. I hope it's going to be only on pure dex items, right? So you're not going to be able to easily stack a lot of energy shield with it, because ES was already very, very busted in comparison to just pure armor or pure, life or evasion. So hopefully that's the case. And then, yeah, my league starter. I'm not sure yet. Deadeye is going to be probably the big winner, and I think most people are going to play Deadeye. I've already played it in 0.2. It was a lot of fun because you're very fast and you still do a lot of damage. So yeah, maybe Deadeye. But I do like Stormweaver. I do love casters, and I think there's going to be a lot of cool, creative builds, right? Using multi-elements, infusions. I just think maybe some mana stacking, right? So I'm very excited to at least make a Stormweaver this season. But maybe Deadeye is just the best choice. But the thing is, I expect so many people to start playing Deadeye, right? It's going to be like Spears or like Lightning Spear in the previous league. So there's going to be a lot of money to be made from items that are good for those types of builds. And so playing something that's not that, right, it's going to reduce the prices for hopefully casters a little bit of items. And if I find a good item for right side of the build trees, I'm kind of thinking in that way, right? But I only have about 6 days to play the start of the league. Then I'm going to go to Japan for a holiday. So yeah, not sure. Stormweaver, Deadeye. Let me know in the comments what you're going to play. I'm very excited. I think I'm going to make a little guide on the Deadeye. But yeah, I'm sorry. This was a very long video, but there's a lot to talk about. I really, really enjoyed it. I just cannot wait. I'm watching videos all day on things that are happening and predictions. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you're gonna play and if you enjoyed this video. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.